Welcome to Backchannel on this Friday morning. It's the 28th of January 2022. I'm Anthony Davis, and here we are back in the self-inflicted quarantine that is solitary confinement. And it's a very nice place to be right now. And if you're enjoying your own quarantine, then you're welcome to join us on Backchannel. We've got lots to talk about this morning. We're going to look at the IRS pushing for users to use facial recognition, and wondered how you felt about that. Also, NASA honors the fallen heroes of the 1986 Space Shuttle Challenger, which lifted off from Cape Canaveral, Florida, and then exploded. And I actually think there's a news story about that I read the other day, saying that the escape pod was actually intact. This is like a new twist on that story that I had no idea. Like, the capsule that they were in was intact and they were able to recover them. This is like a new... whether it was like released because documents got, released to the public because it's been enough time. Sometimes I think you have to wait 20 years or something. But maybe we'll look into that and see how that story changed. We'll also take a look at who's in the running to replace Stephen Breyer in the U.S. Supreme Court. And finally, on this day in 1902, the Carnegie Institute was founded. We'll take a look at the timeline of the rags to riches story of Andrew Carnegie. So that's how we're going to start this morning. That's kind of how it looks. If you want to join in or have your say or contribute in any way, you can go to backchannel.tv and write your review. You can just chat to me that way. Or if you've got an Echo Show device, then all you have to do is wake it up, say the word "say," and then your message. That's how it works. So let's get straight into our morning newspapers. We've got so many of those to get through. Kathy's joined us already. Thank you. Lovely. Nice to know that you're so efficient. You're actually 2 minutes late, but I'll let it go on this occasion. Tomorrow, let's try and be a little bit more on time. You're in Washington, D.C., so it's actually noon for you over there, I think, isn't it? Hi, Kathy. Thank you for joining us. Enterprise Record is the first newspaper on the list that we're going to review because we kind of zigzag around the U.S. We're going to start in Chico, California. I'm in Los Angeles, by the way, in case you were wondering what this backdrop was. This is Los Angeles. This is what it looks like. Pallet Shelters are completed. Yes, electrical and other work continues. The site expected to open in less than 2 months. This is interesting. This is shelters at the emergency non-congregate housing site in Chico are progressing to completion. The shelters themselves are now erected, and the electricians on Thursday worked on adding power lines for heating, air conditioning and lighting. Director of Chico Public Works Operations and Maintenance, Eric Gustafson, said amenities like toilets, showers and hospitality tent are on the way, as well as a portable office for homeless service providers. So this is very interesting. This is like a kind of temporary shelter. This is a very interesting emergency non-congregate shelter site that's being built in Chico. And they say there's still quite a lot of work to be done. It's moving along rather quickly and really at record pace, considering that that's all that's had to be done. As per the Warren v. Chico settlement, before the site goes live and the city begins to intake occupants, a site operator must be present in order for the city to begin. Interesting. And they're going to start opening late February, early March. I mean, it's... The thing is, I have a morbid fascination. Carla, you probably won't know this, but I have a morbid fascination with modular housing. Have you ever had conversations with people about modular housing? About using like modern construction techniques. Instead of building a house out of, a wooden frame, foundations, like a concrete foundations, wooden frame, then you board it, chipboard it, and then you insulate it, then you plaster it, or a brick-built house, not so much in California, brick-built houses, but there are new materials that are prefabricated. You could build a modular house that is better than the old-fashioned, I was going to say wattle and daub, but we don't have to go that far. Better than brick houses that you can erect in minutes. And in fact, they even do 3D printed houses now. Have you seen this? They bring in these giant 3D printers and they print a house. Well, Scandinavians have things like hoof houses. A hoof house is an off-site built, A-frame designed modular house. And what they do is you design it on the computer The client designs it on the computer, and then the wood is cut and the pieces are cut, and the whole thing's loaded onto a big low loader, and then it's delivered. They drive it to you, and then they build it in 2 weeks. They build the whole house in 2 weeks. It's just wonderful. I mean, the majority of the house gets built in 2 days because all the electrical wiring and all the plumbing, it's already built into these prefabricated walls. So this is it's like a kind of hobby of mine that I'm not involved in. I don't build these houses, but I do have a morbid fascination with contemporary building and construction technology. And so for me, the idea of a pallet microshelter, these are shelters that are built out of pallets, container pallets. A lot of houses are being built out of containers now. You know that? The containers, shipping containers that go on ships. They are 40 feet long. A shipping container, I think, is either 20 feet or 40 feet long. And there's one here near where I live, where the house is 3 shipping containers, positioned on top of each other. Then they cut through it to make the staircase, and that becomes the house. People have been living in shipping containers for years, discarded or rusted out shipping containers, and they spray them up and make them work. But I've just always been interested in the fact that we've got all this technology now that we could, and we also have a housing crisis, not just for the homeless, but for people already in homes, that we could solve it all. If Elon Musk had started a housing company instead of a car company, using environmentally friendly, carbon neutral equipment and materials, where he could basically build you a house in 2 weeks, we'd all be living in Tesla houses now. It's true. It was very interesting yesterday. Joe Biden made a speech talking about industry and electric vehicles and all this. And he mentioned General Motors, and I think he mentioned GM, and he mentioned not Chrysler, one of the big American manufacturers, the other one, Chevy. But he didn't mention Tesla. Now, why would Joe Biden make a speech about the electrification of the country and not mention Tesla, who sells 70% of the electric cars in America? Why would he do that? Could it have something to do with the fact that Tesla employees are not unionized? Could it have something to do with the fact that Elon Musk doesn't pay tax? Could it have something to do with the fact that Elon Musk donates to the Republican Party? Just, a few suggestions. But it's good to kind of keep asking questions, isn't it? Oof. So back to the enterprise record. So there we are. Pallet shelters are completed. Pallet shelters. It's just a new way of constructing stuff. Also, these retail stores accept recyclables in Chico. It says residents have been looking for places to recycle their bottles and cans nearly 6 months after the Chico scrap metal recycling center closed. Retail stores in Chico accept recyclables with limitations, according to calrecycle.ca.gov. A recycling center has to be located within half-a-mile radius of a supermarket in California. However, it can apply for exemption from CalRecycle. That's interesting, isn't it? I would like to be able to take I've got a couple of huge cardboard boxes that stuff was delivered in that I can't fit into a regular wheelie bin. I would love to be able to take those somewhere. So maybe this is what I need to do. I need to go look at CalRecycle. I'm not driving to Chico, though. This Chico is not driving to Chico. A self-service system on tap for Paradise Library. The North Valley Community Foundation provides grant funding. And supervisors updated on Butte County water use. This is because of water conservation. So this is how the Enterprise record is starting this Friday morning. I can't believe it's Friday already. George is with us. Good morning, George. Good morning, Stacey, as well, who's having chicken nuggets. Macaroni cheese in a brownie. I think that should say, and a brownie. That's disgusting, isn't it? Think about that. You open up a chocolate brownie, and in you stuff chicken nuggets. This is making me feel sick. And macaroni cheese inside the brownie, and then you eat the whole thing like a burger. Let's go to Eureka in California now. They lead with, will virus be over? Most in US think not. Yes, early in the pandemic, Ryan Wilson was careful to take precautions, wearing a mask, not really socializing, doing more of his shopping online. The 38-year-old father and seafood butcher from Castleberry, Florida, says he relaxed a bit after getting vaccinated last year. He had a few friends over and saw his parents more while making sure to still mask up at places like the grocery store. The recent virus surge hasn't caused him to change his behavior much because he's vaccinated and has read the variant causes less severe illness. Unlike many, Wilson has come to believe that COVID-19 is probably never fully going away. It'll become endemic and we'll be stuck with it forever, he says. It's frustrating, but what can you do about it? Many Americans agree that they're going to be stuck with it forever, or at least for a long time, the poll says. Yes, this is a Associated Press NORC Center for Public Affairs research shows that just a few, 15%, said they'll consider the pandemic over only when COVID-19 is largely eliminated. And by contrast, 83% say they'll feel the pandemic is over when it's largely a mild illness. I mean, we're getting there, aren't we? We're almost at the point of a mild illness now. Almost. Not quite. Almost. It just depends what Omicron becomes, because they've already detected in Denmark or somewhere a new variant. But I think it's a new variant of the Omicron strain. So it could actually be slightly milder than Omicron itself. 59% of all Americans think that it's essential that they personally be vaccinated against COVID to feel safe, particularly in public activities. But underscoring what authorities call alarmingly low COVID-19 vaccination rates in children aged 5 to 11, just 37% of parents consider it essential that their children are vaccinated before they return to normal. And although boosters provide significantly better protection against COVID-19, especially the Omicron variant, than a two-shot course of the Pfizer or Moderna vaccines, just 47% of Americans think it's essential that they get one. I mean, I don't understand how they even are allowed to have an opinion. Think about that. The evidence says that if you are boosted, the chances of you being protected against Omicron are 10 times better than if you have 2 doses. So 3 doses makes you 10 times more protected against Omicron. And yet, 47% of Americans think it's essential that they get one. Just 47%, less than half. I love this kind of confidence that says that people can look at the data and be like, nah. Nah. It's like, if you got the first 2 vaccines, then why not get the third one if it's going to work? You know, you're not anti-vax, but I have met people that are not interested in getting the booster. And I'm like, but it's a 3-shot regimen. That's what it is. I think what happened is people were like, okay, I have to get 2 4 weeks apart. And then they're like, I'm vaccinated. And they were basically told that means you're fully vaccinated. And they weren't emotionally and mentally prepared for a new variant and therefore a new directive. But what we have to understand is that the virus is fluid. And so therefore the only way we can balance that or counteract that fluidity is to be fluid ourselves. With our vaccinations and with our masking up or masking down or whatever else. You know, it ebbs and it flows. And so, therefore, our response should ebb and flow. Some sweet tunes here today, isn't there? Loving this. The poll shows more Americans are taking precautionary measures against the virus than before the Omicron surge. Overall, 64% now say they're always or often avoiding large groups, and 65% are wearing face masks around others, both up from 57% in December. 60% say they are regularly avoiding non-essential travel, up from 53% 1 month ago. Yeah, I'm still not really going out. I mean, I never really went out beforehand, to be honest, but I mean, it's like, to me, really enjoying the fact that, I don't have to go out anymore. It's lovely. Here's a story that I find very interesting. The headline is, "What happens when millions of car batteries get old?" Yeah. Oh, Patty's joined us. Thank you, Patty. Stacey says it's a personal choice whether you should get the vaccine or not. Absolutely, personal choice. But you should still get the vaccine. You just should. It's like, yes, it can be a personal choice, but if you truly care about liberty and being free in this country, you kind of want to be alive, and you want your fellow citizens to be alive. What happens when millions of car batteries get old? California has no EV recycling plants and few plans. Well, you see, I think this is an inaccurate headline, because car batteries don't get old. The whole point of electric cars is that they have batteries in them that stay in them forever. Let me read you the story. It says, as California accelerates its push towards 100% zero-emission new car sales by 2035, hundreds of thousands of electric batteries will be finishing their freeway lives, and it's not clear what's going to happen to them. Currently, many of the massive used batteries, the Tesla version weighs about 900 pounds, appear to be stockpiled in hopes of greater reuse and recycling markets. But eventually those batteries, along with the toxic chemicals that can leak out of them, could end up in hazardous waste landfills. There are no EV battery recycling plants in California, and only 5 running nationwide. That's despite the fact that used lithium-ion batteries contain valuable minerals that otherwise must be mined from the earth, mostly from overseas operations. Well, look, here's what I would say to this. Tesla has a recycling plan in place because they sell another product called the Tesla Powerwall. Are you aware of this, Carla? The Powerwall. And it basically is a formerly used car battery that they rehouse in a white housing, plastic housing, and it gets bolted to the side of your house. And it stores the electricity that your solar panels on your roof generate. Because, as you know, electricity can't be you can't harness electricity for very long. So, once the battery fills up, the battery's filled up. So what they have is they use these old Tesla car batteries, and they've converted them into the Powerwall. So people are increasingly buying the Tesla Powerwall. And hopefully soon there'll come a time when all homes will be powered by the sun and electricity for overnight, to power the house at night if you need to put the light on, or to charge your devices will come from the Powerwall. And that's Tesla. And with the car that I have, the Nissan Leaf, which is 2013, so it's like 9 years old, the battery is still working. It's nearly a 10-year-old car with a 10-year-old technology battery, and it's still charging and discharging and being used very nicely. And that is old battery tech. And it will probably last another 5 years at least and be usable. And 15 years is a good lifespan for a vehicle. But let me tell you something about the new cars that are coming out. If you buy a Tesla now, or if you buy a Hyundai or a Kia or a Chevy Bolt or any of the new electric cars that are on the market right now, those batteries will last forever. They won't need replacing. Battery technology is so good now that they don't need to be recycled. They will outlive the vehicle. So that's why this guy, Martin Wiskol, who's written this article in the newspaper, in the Times Standard, I think he's misinformed. I mean, I think it seems obvious that, yes, the batteries are toxic and they do contain, mined cobalt and lithium and everything else. But the battery lasts forever now. They've got the chemistry of the battery to be so good that it will live longer than the car. Now, this never used to be the case. 10 years ago, when electric cars first became popular, the Nissan Leaf and the BMW i3, those batteries were degrading more. But saying that, I had a 2014 i3. The battery was probably made in 2013. And that was still working fine. April, good morning. Eileen, good morning in Illinois. And April, I'm not sure where you are, but I'm very pleased that you're here. April says, hi. It's 9:21 here on the West Coast. It's 12:21 Eastern. This is Backchannel. I'm Anthony Davis. We're looking through the morning papers. We're looking at the time standard for California, Eureka and Humboldt County. And I'm just reacting to this story that says what happens when millions of car batteries get old. And what I'm saying is that battery tech now is so good that these batteries will not ever need to be replaced. So if you buy an electric car now, you could keep it a lot longer than a gas car because, of course, there's no parts to go wrong. There's no engine, there's no transmission, there's no oil, there's no gas, there's no... all of the bits. There's no radiator, there's no water. All of the things that you have in a car that normally go wrong, you don't have in an electric car. They have hardly any parts. 3 parts: battery, inverter, and electric motor. 3 parts. Electric motors, they're sealed units. They go on forever. Batteries, sealed units, increasingly go on forever. And an inverter, I don't even know what that is. I guess an inverter inverts the energy from the battery to enable to drive the motor. I guess that's what it does. But if you know more than me, then please let me know. Also, U.S. economy grew 5.7% in 2021, a rebound from the 2020 recession. Yes, it grew at the fastest pace since Ronald Reagan's presidency, bouncing back with resilience from 2020's brief but devastating coronavirus recession. The nation's GDP, its total output of goods and services, expanded 5.7% in 2021. It was the strongest calendar year growth since the 7.2% surge in 1984, after a previous recession. The economy ended the year by growing at an unexpectedly brisk 6.9% annual pace from October through December, as businesses replenished their inventories. It's interesting, isn't it? Because Trump used to use this statistic about jobs. And he said, we've had the greatest number of jobs in growth in history. My argument is you've missed out the sentence that precedes that, which is that we had the biggest drop of jobs in history, and because of the pandemic, and therefore it can only come up. And of course, because it's the biggest drop in history, it's coming up at a faster rate than any other time in history because it had the biggest drop in history. And it's the same with these figures. The growth of GDP has expanded 5.7%. But that's because of the drop. But they never say that, do they? It's a bit like inflation. The Republicans are trying to blame Joe Biden for inflation. And yet, if you go to any country in the world right now, their inflation is between 5 and 7%. Highest it's ever been. Or highest it's been in 30, 40 years. It's the worldwide pandemic. It affects goods and services and workers in exactly the same way right around the world. Unless you're in China, of course. It's perfectly contained because they're controlling freedom of movement. Can't go anywhere. I think this bright light behind me is working, Carla. Look at this big bright light. Whoa! You see? I can wear black. I managed to fix the camera today, so the lighting is all balanced. Yesterday, it just didn't look very good. I got the focus right as well. Yeah. I did a lot of work on it. I did white balancing. I did all sorts of things today. And I got the sound working as well. I got the mic the way I like it. Because, these things take time. And time is not something we have much of. I watched a little bit of a film yesterday that I've never seen before. Carla, I'm sure you've seen it. It's called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. The movie version of the famous Douglas Adams book. And it's actually kind of fun. It's got Martin Freeman in it and Stephen Fry and a whole bunch of British actors. It's about 6 years old or 7 years old. And I was like, this is kind of fun. I don't know why I never saw that. Because I never read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. The life, the universe, and everything. It's a big thing. It has a huge worldwide following. I never really got into it. So back to the Times Standard. $2 billion expected in opioid settlement. It says communities impacted by the national opioid crisis could receive a payout from the highly anticipated $26 billion settlement as soon as April, according to California Attorney General Rob Bonta announced yesterday. The city of Eureka, Humboldt County, and the Yurok tribe, as well as thousands of other local jurisdictions across the country, have filed lawsuits against the nation's three largest drug distributors, McKesson Corp, AmerisourceBergen Corp, and Cardinal Health, and drug maker Johnson & Johnson, claiming the companies knowingly misled the public about the addictive nature of opioid painkillers. Do you know what the tragedy is of this story? Is that the $26 billion settlement is a drop in the ocean for these companies. It is literally like they make that kind of profit, in like a minute. That's the tragedy of this. It's like they probably saw this as a win. They were probably like, 26 billion between three of us? Happy to. Got off lightly. So there we go. That's the Times Standard on this Friday morning. Let's move on now to Fresno in California and the Fresno Bee. Biden to name black woman for high court within weeks is the headline there, and a very useful headline as well because he's adjusting. I think he said it was long overdue. He's kind of adjusting the historic nature of high court judges. President Joe Biden praised Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer, who made his retirement official at the White House on Thursday, vowing that his choice to replace him will be a black woman that he plans to announce the choice by the end of next month. Appearing with Breyer before a small group of reporters in the Roosevelt Room, just outside the Oval Office, Biden said it was a bittersweet day for me, noting that he and Breyer go back a long way, and praising him as an exemplary justice and a model public servant at a time of great division in the country. Yes, Justice Breyer kind of did a little brief speech about how the American experiment really is just that, But he said people want law and order, and that people in Europe didn't really trust that the American experiment could work, that this kind of republic could last. And yet, here we are, questioning whether the republic can last. Yeah. California addressing foster youth placement, official says. Oh, hi, Gabe. First time? Wonderful. Welcome to Backchannel. Catherine's here as well. Hello. April, Eileen, Patty, George, Stacy, Kathy. Lovely to hang out with you this morning. California officials said they're working with Madera County and other counties to identify appropriate placements for youths with high needs after revelations that the county has housed a minor with severe mental health issues in an office building for months. What? How did that happen? Meanwhile, a Madera County worker who spoke with the newspaper and asked for anonymity due to fears of retaliation on Wednesday said the minor was recently placed. The youth was placed just before or soon after the publication of a Fresno Bee story, the worker said. The Bee, which first reached out to Madera County officials for comment last week on Tuesday, reported the foster youth under the county's custody have been housed for about 2 to 3 months in a visitation room in the Child Welfare Services building, where social workers report to work. The youth, who might have immigrated from a country in South America and doesn't speak English, was supervised at all times by staff and security, according to interviews and an internal email. Wow. It's like living in an office. I mean, most people live in the office these days now anyway, don't they? Jessica, good morning. Thank you for joining us here on Backchannel. What a pleasure to know you're here. I saw near Fig Garden Village has Fresno residents fed up, it says. A long empty building on a major Fresno thoroughfare has become an eyesore now covered in graffiti, and local neighbors say they want answers. Located at 695 West Shore Avenue, the building sticks out in the upscale neighborhood across the street from Fig Garden Village with its unkempt grass and walls covered in graffiti tags. I don't know, I think it's kind of interesting. They'll probably knock it down. That's what they tend to do. If it's over the age, if it's like over 20 years old, they'll probably just knock it down. Everything's so transient. And finally, on the front of the Fresno Bee this morning, university system considers eliminating SAT requirement. Yes, the nation's largest public university system has signaled plans to eliminate the use of standardized tests like the SAT and ACT for admission to its 23 campuses, which include Fresno State. California State University trustees heard a recommendation on Wednesday from the Systems Administration Advisory Committee to remove the standardized testing requirement and replace it with so-called multi-factor admission score that allows colleges to consider 21 factors. Number 1, are you good looking? Number 2, can you speak French? This is how it would be if it was me in charge. You have to be an attractive French-speaking person. Then you're in. If not, forget it. You have to go to the graffiti-ridden building over the road. It says the factors would vary by campus and include work experience, leadership roles, extracurricular activities, and special status such as foster youth, first generation, or military. As we evolve our admission standards, we do so with a focus on equity and increased awareness of the new data from standardized test scores, said April Gromo, Assistant Vice Chancellor for CSU Enrollment Management Services. Wow, I bet she's got a long business card. So there we go. That's the Fresno Bee this morning. By the way, if you live somewhere where there's a local newspaper that you would like me to read from, just let me know. You can tell your device, wake it up, say, and then your message. Or you can go to backchannel.tv and write me a message there. You can write me. That's an American phrase that I've learned. We don't say that in England. You can write me. Did you say that growing up, Carla? Were you taught to say that? Oh, they wrote me. They wrote me. You can write me. In England, we have the word to in the middle. Right, you can write to me, or they wrote to me. But in America, they don't say the to. It's a little bit like when Melania Trump came up with her tagline, "Be best." And I was like, where's the the? Where's the, Melania? On the front of the Times Union this morning, Kathy, you're back. I think you joined us at 9 o'clock, and now you've come back at 9:33. This is wonderful. Stacey's rejoined as well. I think people sometimes they kind of rejoin, sometimes on a different device. I think it's because people like to, have us on every device in every room. That's why. Albany's architectural tableau, a section of the skyline of the city of Albany, a blend of old style and modern architecture, is seen from the other side of the Hudson River as workers construct a new apartment building. It's a very nice photograph, actually. It's a whole range of different architectural styles. I mean, you wouldn't want to, live amongst it, but it's not bad for the front of a black and white newspaper. Spa City, police readied for riot. It says last July 14, as about 40 social justice advocates prepared to gather in Congress Park. 27 city police officers, a dozen Saratoga County Sheriff's deputies, and 7 undercover officers from both agencies assembled at the Weibel Avenue ice rink. The police were there to be briefed on a detailed operation plan to respond to the protest. Some of that plan, obtained by the Times-Union, included standard measures, such as making traffic control and de-escalation top priorities, with lawful police action to be assessed as needed. Yeah, I still have a problem with lawful police action. You know, lawful police action has seen a lot of people get killed. What about no police action? What about police just doing a lot of shouting rather than shooting? What was that line that Donald Trump used when there were those protests in Portland? He said, "When the looting starts, the shooting starts." Do you remember? He was referring to the police shooting people for looting. When the looting starts, the shooting starts. The former president of the United States said that out loud. When the looting starts, the shooting starts. That was a threat to people. What a lovely thing to live in a kind of under an authoritarian regime. You know, just wouldn't occur to him that you just don't say stuff like that. You just don't say that. Don't say it. You can think it, but don't say it. You know, what you're doing is you're setting an example to the rest of the world. Because Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil will hear you say that because he's your biggest fan. And he'll be like, that's a good one. I'll use that. State schools' financial picture brightens a bit. 23 school districts statewide were in some level of fiscal stress last year, according to State Controller Tom Neapoli's fiscal stress monitoring system. I bet that's like a big machine in a room at the end of a corridor. Have you seen Tom's fiscal stress monitoring system? It's huge. Down from 31 stress districts at the end of 2019 to 2020 academic year. Hi, Connor. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to Backchannel. This guy also released a report examining COVID-19 related fiscal challenges school districts faced last year, the first full year operating under pandemic conditions. They said fewer of New York school districts were scored as under fiscal stress in 2021, but the operational issues caused by the pandemic for all school districts were extreme. So there we go. That's the Times-Union this morning. Let's move on now to the New York Times, which is from New York. And a very harrowing picture on the front. They always like to kind of be extra dramatic with their photography. The headline is "Tracking Down ISIS. A woman and child left a home in Hasaka, Syria, as Kurdish special forces searched for escaped prisoners and ISIS fighters." And it's a very detailed and dramatic photograph. I mean, you can really see literally every pixel. And this poor child looking across at these men, SWAT teams, with their semi-automatic weapons. It's not a pretty sight. You know, if you're a parent and you have a child and you're kind of ever faced with a situation like this, you know, for me as a parent, it changes the way I look at a photograph like this. Before I had kids, I would have looked at this photo and been like, oh yeah, look. And now I'm like, ouch. You see something quite different. What I see is, instead of seeing the guns and the military uniforms and everything else, what I actually see is the parent protecting their child. I see the mother with her hands on the shoulders of her son, pushing him out of the door. Quick, get out of the way. Let's go, let's go, let's go. A parent will do anything to protect their child. And that's what I see. And that's why, even though this mother is in Syria, that I have empathy for her. Like, I feel more connected to her than anybody. In fact, I know exactly what she's feeling and what she's going through. And that's my point about parenting, is that it kind of connects us all in some way. The New York Times also leads with economy in 2021 surged by 5.7%, best in decades. Yes, the US economy ended last year with a flourish as consumer spending and business investment helped loosen the pandemic's stubborn grip. Gross domestic product, the broadest measure of the nation's production of goods and services, expanded by 1.7% in the final 3 months of 2021, after adjusting for inflation. And if you were to watch Fox News, in inverted commas, or any of the right-wing media, they would tell you that Biden has tanked the economy, that the economy has never been so bad this year, that Trump saved the economy and Biden has ruined the economy. And they talk about it for hours. I watch it. They talk for hours about how completely, how down the US economy is and how fundamentally it's been destroyed. That's what they're saying. And so you've got half the people in this country who follow that stuff thinking that the country is doing really badly, and yet the numbers say a very different story. The broadest measure of the nation's production of goods and services, GDP, expanded by 1.7% in the final 3 months of 2021. And after adjusting for inflation, the Commerce Department announced on Thursday for the full year, the economy grew 5.7%, the largest annual increase since 1984. The economic lift was largely provided by vaccination efforts. Biden. Cheap credit conditions put in place by the Federal Reserve. Biden. And a fresh round of federal aid to households and businesses. Biden. And so what you'll end up with is, people complaining about not wanting to wear a mask or vaccine mandates or, social distancing. And they'll also be complaining that Biden did nothing to stop the pandemic. That's how you stop the pandemic. You wear a mask, you get vaccinated, and you stay away from people. That's how you stop the pandemic. It says the economic lift was largely provided by vaccination efforts, cheap credit conditions put in place by the Federal Reserve. Last year was defined by very strong policy support, said Julia Coronado, a former Federal Reserve economist and professor of finance at the University of Texas at Austin. And 2022 is going to be defined by the removal of that support by Congress and the Fed alike. The fourth quarter was, to some extent, a respite between coronavirus waves. It began as the Delta variant was easing, and the impact of Omicron began to be felt in only the final weeks. Now the question is whether the coming months can deliver an even fuller recovery, and how much of a shadow will be cast by the higher prices that have come with it. Also on the front of the New York Times on this Friday morning, with schools closed, hope fades for a lost generation in India. Yes, some children have forgotten the alphabet or what their classrooms look like. Others have dropped out of school entirely, scrounging for work and unlikely to ever resume their studies. For years, India has been counting on its vast pool of young people as a wellspring of future growth, a demographic dividend, as many like to put it. But now, after 2 years of the coronavirus pandemic, it's looking more like a lost generation, crushing the middle-class dreams of families looking for better opportunities for their children. Hundreds of millions of students across India have received little to no in-person instruction, with schools intermittently shut down since the start of the pandemic. As pandemic restrictions are lifted, then reimposed, schools are often the first places to close and the last to reopen. And finally, Austin orders military changes after rash of civilian casualties. This is Defense Secretary Lloyd J. Austin III. He ordered the military on Thursday to strengthen its efforts to prevent civilian deaths and to improve the way it investigates and acknowledges claims of civilian harm in U.S. combat operations. In his most sweeping statement on the issue to date, Mr. Austin set in motion a series of measures that military officials say are intended to change how commanders in the field think about their jobs, fostering a culture in which they view preventing civilian harm as a core part of their mission. I mean, how did that just kind of happen now? Why has it taken this long for the defense secretary or successive defense secretaries to be like, you know something? You know those civilians that get caught in the crossfire? Do you not think we should think a little bit more about them? I mean, I'm very grateful that he's made this announcement, but it also highlights the fact that it needs to be done. And the fact that it needs to be done just kind of supports my theory that people who go into professions that involve guns, they actually quite like killing people. In a weird, kind of morbid fashion. You know? Give me the big guns. Let's make a mess. We can and will improve upon efforts to protect civilians, Mr. Austin said in a 2-page directive to top civilian and military officials. The protection of innocent civilians in the conduct of our operations remains vital to the ultimate success of our operations and a significant strategy and moral imperative. It says the move comes after a series of investigations by the New York Times into airstrikes that killed civilians, including the cover-up of a strike in Syria in 2019 that killed dozens of women and children, and a botched drone strike in Kabul, Afghanistan that killed 10. Yeah, do you remember that one in Afghanistan? Do you remember what happened? It was like 2 days after they'd evacuated the airport, the international airport. And they were still evacuating people because, of course, it took a few days. And they had intelligence to say that a little car, like a small SUV, was potentially carrying a suicide bomber who was heading towards the airport. And they took it out in a drone strike, and the intelligence was false. And it was a family that they struck, that the Americans killed. And initially they kind of, they said, oh no, we got it right, and then obviously it came out. Once the family of the family realized that the people hadn't come home, word spread very quickly, and then the military had to backtrack. But the one that Donald Trump was responsible for was the cover-up of the strike in Syria in 2019 that killed dozens of women and children. That one was literally covered up by the military. At least the drone strike recently near the Afghan airport, at least they finally admitted to that one, and they've now paid some, compensation to the family. Here's an interesting opinion piece. It says, if GDP is up, why do voters feel so down? Yes, President Biden is contending with an uncomfortable disconnect. The economy grew at the fastest rate since 1984 last year, but voters, are downright pessimistic about economic conditions and their own financial prospects. It says the divide traces back to the lingering pandemic and high prices, economists said. Inflation is running at its fastest pace since 1982, eroding gains and eating away at paychecks, and even robust wage increases struggle to keep pace. And despite vaccines, life has yet to return to normal in the way many people once expected. Or maybe people are just watching Fox News and they're being told that the economy is in the doldrums and that's why it's all so bad, and that, maybe it makes them feel bad. I mean, that's my other worry, How do you tell people? I mean, I do think that this administration could be better at this, explaining to people what it is that they're actually doing, rather than just letting it happen. Because, Trump was so good at that, even though he didn't really do anything. he was very good at making a noise about it, shouting about it. And that's really what we have to kind of understand, is that marketing is such a big part of politics, isn't it? You have to really be able to communicate to people what it is that you're attempting to do, why you're doing it. Thank you very much for being in touch. Lots of people jumping on. Vicky just joined us as well. Welcome. Nice to know you're around. here on Backchannel. I'm Anthony Davis. We are live from Los Angeles. It's the 28th of January, 2022. And we're just looking through the morning papers, seeing what's happening right across the US on this Friday morning. Can't believe it's the end of the month already. Can't believe it's the end of the month. How do we do that? Like we just had Christmas 15 minutes ago. I mean, this is my worry, is that if time is moving this quickly, then I'm going to be like 65 in about 3 weeks. So that's how the New York Times leads. Just one final story on the front of the New York Times. Biden to pick name for court within a month. It says Biden said on Thursday that he would name a successor for Justice Stephen Breyer by the end of February, calling the retiring judge a model public servant in a time of great division, and pledging to take what he called the overdue step of putting a black woman on the court for the first time in its 232-year history. Tragically, it's not going to really change the balance of the conservative viewpoint on the court. And in fact, there's a whole... Bryn, good morning. Thank you for joining us. There's actually a whole controversial story out this morning about one of the justice's wives, Clarence Thomas's wife. Clarence Thomas is going to be the oldest judge on the bench now. He'll be 74 when Stephen Breyer retires. And his wife is a conservative activist. And they're saying, there was a headline out I read this morning, I think it might have been in The Guardian, who is the most powerful judge? Is it the judge or the judge's wife? Because as we know, behind every powerful man is an even more powerful woman. And in the case of Clarence Thomas, I think his wife is a force to be reckoned with. Let's go to Rochester, New York now for the Democrat and Chronicle. That's the name of the newspaper. Federal judge rejects halt to COVID orders. Yes, a retired lawyer argued in a federal lawsuit that no distinctions should be drawn between vaccinated and unvaccinated individuals. It says, what's next for Hochul's mask order while we wait on courts? Yes, this is Governor Kathy Hochul's indoor mask mandate is back for now as New York courts decide its fate, and the governor weighs whether she wants to extend it past the 1st of February. Meanwhile, schools, businesses, and county officials are again figuring out enforcement or not. A state Supreme Court judge yanked the regulations on Monday, but by Tuesday, a higher court judge issued a stay, allowing the mandate to stand until the courts figure out its future. I've never known so much court action as I do in this country. It's like everything is done by the court. Like judges have so much power in America. They really do control everything. Yeah, Clarence Thomas's wife endorsing the January 6th insurrection. She's a conservative with a large C, and she must influence her husband. She must. Just at the dinner table. She doesn't sit under the desk during judicial hearings. Over the dinner table. His opportunity for any kind of impartiality is completely void by nature of the fact that she is an activist. She set up all these various fundraisers and things. He is the most right-wing judge on the High Court now. Clarence Thomas. Groups press for hearings on maps is the headline here. It says the leaders of good government groups called Wednesday for New York's legislature to hold public hearings before passing new congressional and legislative district maps in the coming days. The state's Independent Redistricting Commission has failed to come to agreement on a single set of maps for lawmakers to consider after holding public hearings starting last fall on draft political maps submitted by Democratic and Republican commissioners. And that means the legislature can now start from scratch and pass their own set of maps that will lay out political boundaries for the next decade. Those maps could vary drastically from the ones the public had a chance to weigh in on. A small group of lawmakers and staffers on the 6-member state task force on demographic research and reapportionment is working on the maps behind the scenes. So that's the Democrat and Chronicle for this Friday morning, which is... Where's it from? Oh, Rochester. That's right, Rochester. Should we go to the Staten Island Advance now? You forget about Staten Island, don't you? It's like the poor relation. It's the poor relation. Amazon workers get go-ahead for union vote is the headline. Amazon workers at Staten Island's JFK 8 facility have met federal requirements to hold a vote on unionization. Representatives for the Amazon Labor Union at the Bloomfield facility turned in at least 1,500 workers' signatures expressing interest in organizing, according to the NLRB. And union organizers are seeking to represent 5,000 hourly, full-time, and regular part-time fulfillment center associates at the massive warehouse that opened in 2018. I like how they call them associates. So that story is, developing, but the Labour Relations Board has confirmed that Amazon workers have now lined up enough support to vote on whether to unionize. State expands eligibility for medical marijuana. This new system allows more medical professionals to certify patients with any condition they believe can be treated with cannabis. Well, I thought all conditions can be treated with cannabis. Isn't that right? I just presumed that was the case. Got a little headache, feeling a little nauseous, a little back pain, annoyed with the kids. It's so interesting to me. Let me just explain something for a second. My earpiece is getting stuck. And that is that, I spent 40 years in England, right, where marijuana is a Class B drug, highly illegal. And yet, you come here to this state of California, and where it's been legal since 2017, and it's like, wow! Not only can you smoke it, you can talk about it on the radio. Like in England, you couldn't even talk about it. You could have a little debate occasionally, but you weren't really allowed to kind of say, "Oh yeah, cured me of my headache yesterday." This is such a talk about freedom in America. This really is a real kind of... Oh, I'm all tangled up now. What is happening here? What is happening here? Look at me. Oh, this is embarrassing. What a rookie mistake. What a rookie mistake this is. This is so embarrassing. It's lucky this isn't television, isn't it? There we go. We're sorted out now. I can only apologize for this interruption in the service. The medical cannabis data management system, which simplifies the certification and registration process for practitioners, patients and caregivers, officially launched with new updates on Monday. And it says the new system allows practitioners to certify patients with any condition they believe can be treated with medical cannabis. Practitioners' increased discretion was granted under the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act. Tremaine Wright, the chair of the Cannabis Control Board, which oversees OCM, described the expansion as terrific. There you are. I was watching a movie yesterday. Well, we'll do the US news update in just a minute, by the way. I was watching a movie yesterday. I've been watching it over 3 days because I don't get much time, but if I get like half an hour off, I like to have like a film on. And so I watched... One of my favorite films is The Dark Knight, the Christopher Nolan Batman movie, with Heath Ledger playing the Joker. But, I never really was drawn to the film that came after that, The Dark Knight Rises, the one with Bane, Tom Hardy playing Bane. And I was never really drawn to that. Anyway, since Christopher Nolan got all that criticism for the fact that you couldn't hear Bane's voice, they've remixed it. So now you can hear Bane's voice perfectly well. And so I watched the film, And I was like, this is amazing. This might even be like as good / better than the previous one, which I thought was a perfect movie. But the reason I'm saying this is because, that story about Staten Island. And there's a photograph of some police officers. It says hundreds of people waited outside St. Patrick's Cathedral in sub-freezing temperatures on Thursday to pay their respects to one of the 2 police officers that died last week. And the uniforms that they're wearing and this image reminded me of a scene from this movie because, of course, the Staten Island Ferry and that whole lower Manhattan area is used as Gotham. In the Batman movies, that is Gotham. But they don't call it New York, they call it Gotham. So Gotham in the comic books was a fictional New York-like city. And, with bridges, and they're always trying to shoot out the bridges to stop people escaping or stop the baddies from coming in or whatever. And it was a very, very interesting sequence to kind of watch the way they shot New York, and yet they kind of muddied it up a bit to make it look like Gotham. Gotham is like a kind of more of a DC version of the real thing, isn't it? And it was wonderful to see Sir Michael Caine, playing Alfred again, and I really enjoyed it. And one of my favourite actresses is Marianne Cotillard, and she's one of the main characters in it as well. The cast is so good. Christopher Nolan has a repertory company of actors. He uses the same actors in all his films, like old, British repertory theatre. That the same actors come back and play different characters. I love that. Yeah, Wes Anderson does it, that's right. Woody Allen does it. Yeah. Cruise? Yeah. Yeah, Bill Murray's always in Wes Anderson movies. But it's just interesting seeing these characters return. And I mean, in the Batman movies, Gary Oldman as the casting of Gary Oldman is so good. He is so good. I'm like, it's just wonderful to watch. Anyway, so this is why I'm kind of interested about Staten Island. It's because we've been reading from the Staten Island Advanced newspaper. And how Staten Island is represented. But also I noticed in one of these helicopter shots of the whole of Manhattan, you see the Freedom Tower being built. Of course, the Freedom Tower, which was built on the site of the Ground Zero. And so you can age the movie by looking at the point at which the Freedom Tower is under construction. And it's like 2/3 done. But you only see it momentarily in the distance. And it's just very interesting how New York is Gotham and Gotham is New York. But there's no mention of New York. Just very, I just think I like the idea of the DC universe. And I could recommend, if you're interested, I don't know if you like that whole kind of Batman space, but the character of Alfred, which is, Alfred Pennyworth, is the butler. There's a show called Pennyworth that is a separate DC show that is made by the people that made the show Gotham. And it's all about young Alfred in London being a bouncer at a nightclub and how he works as a kind of secret hitman. It's very good. Stacey has to go now. Thank you, Stacey. Appreciate you spending your time with us. Apparently there was a cartoon that proved that Batman was a conservative because the cartoon says it's Alfred saying, Why don't we use all of your wealth to redistribute the money and solve the poor, the crisis of the poor? And he goes, no, I'll just put on this bat suit. I love the idea that, Batman is a conservative who's like choosing to take on the world's problems in his own vigilante fashion. But at the end of The Dark Knight Rises, there's this wonderful sequence where you meet Robin, the guy who goes on to become Robin. And I'd completely forgotten about that. Christopher Nolan definitely is my favorite director. I really feel that. Not with all movies. I didn't like Dunkirk or Tenet particularly, but I really do feel that, Nolan is... It's a British thing, I guess. But Inception is just one of the great films. Don't you think? Have you any idea what it's about? No, me neither. But it's one of the great films. Okay, should we do the US news update now? Take a little look at what's happening around the United States. This is a 2-minute podcast that I produce every day. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts. And here's a chance for you to hear it now.
It's Friday, January 28. From the Volley Network, this is your daily US news update. I'm Anthony Davis. President Joe Biden on Thursday said he plans by the end of February to nominate a black woman to replace retiring US Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer, an historic first that he called long overdue. Biden appeared with Breyer, who he has known since the 1970s, at the White House after the 83-year-old justice formally announced his retirement in a letter to the president. Breyer wrote that he plans to depart at the conclusion of the court's current term, typically at the end, assuming his successor has been confirmed by the U.S. Senate. Biden, who won the Democratic Party's 2020 presidential nomination, in large part because of strong support from black voters, noted that he committed during the campaign to name a black woman to a time post on the High Court and would keep his promise. Our process is going to be rigorous. I will select a nominee worthy of Justice Breyer's legacy of excellence and decency, Biden said, calling the selection of a Supreme Court justice one of a president's most serious constitutional responsibilities. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said Biden believes that being a sitting judge is not a prerequisite for his nominee, and that whether a candidate could draw support from Republicans is not an influencing factor. Biden said he wants the Senate, which his fellow Democrats control by a razor-thin margin, to move promptly once he chooses his nominee. Democrats can confirm a nominee without a single Republican vote because Republicans in 2017 changed the Senate to no longer require 60 of the 100 senators to allow Supreme Court nominations to move forward. Your daily US news update is part of the Volley Network. To hear my live daily morning show, ask your Amazon Echo device to open Backchannel.
And there it goes, the US news update. Whoa! I do love the music there. That's composed by Ollie Marland, who is Cher and Tina Turner's musical director, a good friend of mine and a wonderful composer. It's 9 minutes after 10. It's Backchannel, 28th of January, 2022. And we are looking at the morning papers. We've just finished with the Staten Island Advance, and we're going to move on a little bit to where are we going to go next? I think we've kind of done them all. Oh, no, we've got to go to New York again. We're going to stay in New York, and we're going to go to the Post-Standard. By the way, if you haven't yet got in touch and you'd like to, got something to say, want to contribute to the conversation, Anesu just joined us. Stacey had to leave. Hav is with us as well. Lewis has just joined us. Thank you for joining Backchannel. It's Friday morning. It's the final day of the week. So if tomorrow's a day off for you, then, it's very well deserved. The Post-Standard for Washington leads with needs to use irs.gov. The IRS wants to scan your face. We're going to talk about this in some detail, actually, but it says millions of Americans will soon have to scan their faces to access their Internal Revenue Service tax accounts. One of the government's biggest expansions yet of facial recognition software into people's everyday lives. Taxpayers will still be able to file their tax returns the old-fashioned way, but this summer, anyone wanting to access their records, including details about child tax credits, payment plans, or tax transcripts on the IRS website will be required to record a video of their face with their computer or smartphone and send it to the private contractor ID.me to confirm their identity. I mean, the issue I have with that is that you have to send it to a private contractor first. Do you know what I mean? I mean, why can't you deal with the government directly? I don't want to give my facial recognition to a private contractor. About 70 million Americans who've filed for unemployment insurance, pandemic assistance grants, child tax credit payments, or other services have already been scanned by the Virginia-based company, which says its client list includes 540 firms, 30 states, including California, Florida, New York, and Texas, and 10 federal agencies, including Social Security, Labor, and Veterans Affairs. But ID.me's $86 million contract with the IRS has alarmed researchers and privacy advocates who say that they worry about how Americans' facial images and personal data will be safeguarded in the years to come. There is no federal law regulating how the data can be used or shared. The system itself is also drawing complaints. Some of its people have reported frustrating glitches and hours-long delays that have kept them from important benefits, and researchers have argued the company has overstated the abilities of the face scanning technology that could wrongly flag people as frauds. I don't even have face scanning technology. I mean, as in, like, I don't have a phone that has a face camera. I mean, it has obviously a face camera, but it doesn't have the face scanning technology. It just has a button. Do I need to have that in the phone in order to do this, or can it just be done through the camera? I guess it can just be done through the camera. I don't think they're going to assume that everybody's got a Face ID. Because, Face ID that's built into your phone is the most secure because that data never leaves your phone. Did you realize that? The face scanning data in your iPhone stays in your phone. It never goes to Apple. That's the reason why it's so secure. Whereas what they're talking about here is, I presume, using any camera on any computer that will then scan your face, which means that the data is stored at this company in Virginia. Yeah, I mean, I prefer fingerprint scanning, which is why I have a phone that has a button on it, because I just feel like for me the button is more. It feels more secure, but also I can unlock my phone as it's coming out of my pocket with my thumb. I don't have to hold it all the way up to my face, and that's what I hated about having the Face ID camera. So I got rid of it and I went back to a phone with a button. But my point is that, and also when the masks became part of our lives, suddenly the Face ID wouldn't work anyway. And having the button, I felt like I was winning. I was winning. But, where do you... sometimes I feel like we are over-complicating things. So to verify one's identity, ID.me requires scans of a person's face as well as copies of identifying paperwork, such as driver's license, government-issued ID, or utility bill. The company then uses facial recognition software to assess whether a person's video selfie and official photo match. Yeah, that's what it is. It's a video selfie. Any camera on any computer taking your data and sending it over to that company. Whereas Face ID on an iPhone stays in the phone. All of the decryption and the decoding is done in the phone. It never gets sent to a server. And that's why it's secure. Because you're not giving your data away. It's the same with the fingerprint sensor. The fingerprint sensor does not send your fingerprint to Apple. It does it on the phone. All the encrypted data is in the phone. Your fingerprints stay in the phone. It says if the system flags an issue, a person will have to then join a live video call with one of the company's trusted referees, who then ask them to hold up physical copies of personal documents, such as passport, birth certificate, or health insurance. It's ridiculous. It's just like, it's not the technology's not there yet. They should have subcontracted this to Apple. They've already worked out how to do this without sending data over the air. The company's privacy policy says it can use people's sensitive or personally identifiable information to cooperate with law enforcement activities. And Blake Hall, the ID.me's co-founder and chief executive, said the company alerts its government clients when it detects clear cases of identity theft or fraud. Though people can ask ID.me to delete their biometric data, the company is required to store the data for at least 7 years, in keeping with the federal auditing rules. Hall said in an interview that the company's system has met tough security and accuracy standards. Set by him? He compared the identity checks to someone being asked to present an ID when opening a bank account, saying, "We're digitizing a process Americans are already quite used to." I don't know about that. You are asking people to transmit their identity over the internet. You're not giving it to one person who's going to go and photocopy it and put it in a file. You're basically giving that person's ID to the whole world if your system gets hacked. And the next big story that will come will be that ID.me has been hacked, right? I mean, at least if your Ticketmaster account gets hacked, as mine has been multiple times, worst case scenario, they just get your credit card details and you get a new credit card. This is everything, giving you everything. The partnership with ID.me has drawn the attention of Senator Ron Wyden, who tweeted that he was very disturbed by the plan and would push the IRS for greater transparency. So it starts this summer. You'll need to provide a video of your face to access the agency's website. I mean, also, let's be honest, the low resolution of a face camera, it's going to mean that it's going to be open to fraud. Because these face cameras, they're not high res. They don't do what a face tracking camera... See, I have a camera here in the front of my phone, but what I don't have, because it's not one of those phones, is a face scanner. They call it like a LiDAR scanner or something. Something that scans your face. You know? I don't have that. But I'll get it. I'll get it. I'm just watching the YouTube live stream of this show. Look, this is the live stream of this show that's going out now. I wonder if I can rewind myself. Oh yeah, look, I'm now holding it up. Isn't that funny? The live stream of this show is streaming like a few seconds behind this show. I feel like I'm in Inception. I'm in a dream within a dream. That's what's happening to me right now. I'm in Inception. This is very interesting. I'm actually watching my own show and finding it really interesting. I'm like, yeah, the guy's talking about Face ID and he's talking about the IRS. I'm like, yeah, I'd watch this. I mean, it's a shame about his face, obviously, but I mean, he's doing his best. You can do the same. You just go to YouTube, just search Anthony Davis Backchannel, and it'll come up, and you'll be able to see what all this is about. This is weirdly narcissistic, isn't it? Having a weird kind of in-person narcissistic Inception-style experience right now, where I'm talking to you, but I'm watching this show from like 10 seconds ago. And I'm like, who am I? I mean, if I stop talking, is this going to stop? Wouldn't it be amazing if I just stopped talking to you, but this kind of carried on? Should I just freeze? He's still talking. The guy's got verbal diarrhea. And probably real diarrhea as well, knowing him. Anaisu's joined us. Lewis, Hav, Bryn, Vicky, Jessica, Connor, Stacey, Kathy. Thank you, everybody. Ask and Gabe and Catherine, April and Eileen and Patty and George and Kathy. I said Kathy twice, but she rejoined. That's how I know. Lewis, is your name pronounced Louis or Lewis? You know, because the jury's out about Louis Armstrong, don't you? You know, because we would say in England, we would say Louis Armstrong. But if you listen to him singing, he sometimes sings his own name, and he sings, "And old Lewis." And I was like, wow, he calls himself Louis Armstrong in the song. Hi, Jennifer. And it's very interesting that we are, culturally, because I worked on jazz radio stations for a while, so I kind of learned these things. And I felt like all these years I've been saying Louis Armstrong, and it's Louis Armstrong. But then I was like, now hang on a second, because, some people whose names are Louis, they kind of informally refer to themselves as Louis. But then when it comes to saying it in a specific fashion, you might want to kind of up the ante and add the S. I mean, I spent ages trying to work out the correct pronunciation of Justice Breyer. Because it's spelt Breyer. Breyer. But it's pronounced Breyer. Oh, Charlize Theron. Everyone says Theron, Charlize Theron. Yeah. Oh, well, I had this with Ghislaine Maxwell recently. I was learning how to say Ghislaine Maxwell because people were calling her Ghislaine. And do you know how I worked out how you say that? I watched an interview with her brother. And her brother was talking about her and referred to her as Ghislaine. And I was like, that's how you say it, Ghislaine. And it's the same with Virginia Giuffre, who's the woman that's suing Prince Andrew. Virginia Giuffre, not Guffrey, as some people say. Virginia Giuffre. I love the fact that all of these names have a kind of French influence. It's rather wonderful, isn't it? It's a bit like how croissant is said in America. Croissant. Whereas in England we say croissant. A croissant. When we say croissant. Do you say croissant, Carlo? Croissant? Croissant. But in England, we don't even say the R. We say croissant. So we leave out the R. It should be croissant. We say croissant. So weird. Shannon, hello. Thank you for joining the show today. This is Backchannel. It's 10:23. I'm Anthony Davis. And you have me for another half an hour. And then your pal Hal will be here having a conversation with you. Probably talking about the movies, things to watch, popular culture, gaming. He has very different interests to me. It's great. Oh yeah, what's trending on Twitter? He looks at that. I was trending on Twitter like 2 days ago. And I was like, wow. And then I realized it was the guy who plays for the Lakers. Whenever that guy's playing for the Lakers, I always get a little overexcited. He's obviously like scored a goal or something. What do you call it? A touchdown? I don't know. I'm not a natural. Is he baseball or basketball? Or softball? Or badminton? Oh, he shoots hoops. That's why he's like 7'9". He's gigantic, that guy, Anthony Davis. Gigantic. Anyway, great name. Okay, we've got a couple more papers to get through. What we're actually doing today, interestingly, is we've kind of been talking about some of the topics that are in our running order whilst we're doing the newspaper review, which I kind of like it that way around. Kind of works for me a little bit more, you know? Seems less forced. Yeah. The headline on the front of the Bradenton Herald, which is for Florida, is Joseph Ladapo, who was appointed as Florida's Surgeon General in September, speaking at a January 3rd press conference. This is the guy who yesterday I described as refusing to admit that vaccines work against coronavirus. And this is why Ron DeSantis has chosen him. The headline is Democrats walk out of Surgeon General confirmation hearing. It says a panel of Florida senators on Wednesday advanced the confirmation of Joseph Ladapo, Governor Ron DeSantis' pick to be Florida Surgeon General. After grilling Ladapo for an hour on COVID-19 vaccines, his resume and other Department of Health initiatives, Democrats refused to participate in the vote. We don't feel that we're getting any answers, says Senator Lauren Book. Just before senators were set to begin debate over the confirmation, the Florida Senate Democrats in the committee now are going to abstain, walk out, and come back when we have more business. The Republicans on the committee then quickly advanced his nomination. Democrats are in the minority on the committee, and their votes would not have changed the outcome. His candidacy to be the state's top doctor and the leader of the Department of Health will be heard by another, see page 5. This guy is not qualified, right? You know, hi, Jennifer Lopez. Thank you for messaging the show. Appreciate it. Big fan. Got all your albums. This guy is not qualified because anybody that says that refuses to admit that vaccines work is clearly politically motivated. And it's a tragedy that he has been. I mean, if you're like a proper doctor, let alone somebody who's going to be the Surgeon General, you swear an oath to your profession, don't you? You swear an oath to your profession. And yet, it just goes to prove that even the medical profession is up for sale in America. And that is why we are in the state that we're in. Well, I'm in California. They're in Florida. It is just going to result in more people dying. And DeSantis doesn't care. In the same way that when DeSantis was asked about climate change, he said, "Oh, that's Democrat stuff." You know, they must know in their heart of hearts, these people, whether it's being a climate change denier or denying that the vaccines work. When you look at the statistics, you are 10 times more likely to survive COVID if you are vaccinated. In fact, I think it's a higher statistic than that. But he, as a doctor, must know the facts. And he must know that he is purposely not supporting the facts in this interaction. And DeSantis must know what the facts are. DeSantis pretended that he was on vacation a few weeks ago, and the guy was obviously away recovering from coronavirus. It was blatantly obvious. The guy couldn't breathe in the press conference before he left. Couldn't breathe. He was so ill. Imagine what your ego and your allegiance to your supreme leader, Donald Trump, must be like for you to admit or to not admit that you are suffering from coronavirus and to not admit that you've been vaccinated. DeSantis won't admit it. You ask him the question, he won't answer the question. That's what it's come down to now. Lying about healthcare for political reasons. They all know they're lying. I mean, this photograph is fascinating. It's a photograph of Joseph Lopado and Ron DeSantis and some other guy in the background. And their faces give everything away. That they are all lying. They should be wearing masks, and then you wouldn't see that their faces were lying. It'd be easier for them to lie. But they won't wear masks, of course, because they don't think coronavirus is a problem. Meanwhile, there are more people dead in Florida and in intensive care units than anywhere else in the country. Researchers say shark attacks increase after 3 years of decline. Well, they're probably hungry. Shark attacks increased around the world in 2021 following 3 consecutive years of decline, though beach closures in 2020 caused by COVID-19 pandemic could be making the numbers seem more dramatic than they are. Researchers with the International Shark Attack File recorded 73 unprovoked incidents last year, compared to 52 bites in 2020, according to a new report. The research is administered by the Florida Museum of Natural History and the American Elasmo Branch Society. International Shark Attack File Manager Tyler Bowling pointed out that 52 bites in 2020 were the lowest documented in more than a decade. The 73 bites in 2021 more closely aligned with the 5-year global average of 72. I really don't like the idea of being bitten by a shark. You know, I have family members that go surfing and stuff like that, and it makes me nervous. The idea of like surfing in shark-infested waters and just for the kick. You know? Oh, you've been stingrayed, have you? Yeah. I've had a jellyfish thing. Wow. I mean, yeah. I'd rather just be in like a nice swimming pool. Not even a public pool. Someone's pool. Like, go to someone's house who's got a pool. Swim in their pool. It's like the safest way of swimming. In fact, don't even swim at all. Just take a bath. In fact, don't take a bath because it's unhygienic. Just take a shower. And don't be in there very long because climate change means we don't want to waste water. So just have like a quick shower and get out. In fact, just wash at the sink. Just use a sponge. A gang member sentenced to life in prison for murder on the front of the newspaper. A Bradenton man and previously documented member of the street gang Sir 13 will spend the rest of his life in prison for the 2019 fatal shooting of 24-year-old Joshua Gonzalez. His name is Catalino Reyes, who has a face tattoo of 187, the penal code for murder in California, was found guilty in November. Do you think that's how they worked out it was him? It was the guy that had 187 tattooed on his face, the penal code for murder in California. Is that how they knew it was him? In the identity parade. That guy. Face tattoo. 187. And finally, Biden to name black woman for High Court within weeks. I don't know why he needs till the end of February to do it. Literally, please do it by Monday. Just do it by Monday. I guarantee there's going to be a problem with this. Something's going to happen. You know, the Republicans are not going to join in. They're not going to vote. So the Democrats will have to vote. And then you'll get Manchin and Sinema. They'll be like, no, we're not voting for this because, because you've already heard that people like Susan Collins of Maine, she's already started to put the cat amongst the pigeons about this. She's like, oh, no, we will scrutinize it. This is what they'll do. They're going to draw it out as long as possible, get it after the midterms. I'm telling you, this is not going to go smoothly. It is not going to go smoothly. Even though the Republicans changed the law that enabled Donald Trump to get 3 Supreme Court justices in during his 4-year tenure. Can you believe? I mean, that was the worst part of Donald Trump's tenure, was putting 3 conservatives on the Supreme Court, because it meant that he knew that he was protected. He thought these people would protect him. Well, they didn't when it came to the insurrection. You know, they refused to hear his case. The Miami Herald this morning leads with a photograph of Palestinians enjoying the snow next to the dome of the Rock Mosque. Where is the Rock Mosque? Oh, it's in Al-Aqsa compound in Jerusalem on Thursday. That was yesterday. A rare snowfall hits part of Israel and the West Bank, closing schools and businesses. I mean, this is climate change personified. There's not supposed to be snow in the Middle East. It's just not supposed to be there. It never snows in the Middle East. What's going on? Also, sheriff fires union leader who says he used scare tactics. This is Broward Sheriff Gregory Toney fired longtime nemesis and police union president Jeff Bell on Thursday after an oversight board agreed that the sheriff's most vocal critic misled media outlets about deputies not being offered enough protection gear during the COVID-19 pandemic. Interesting. Coast Guard ends search as 34 migrants are feared dead. Survivor saw his sister die. Oh man, that's just tragic, isn't it? Yeah. And Miami-Dade begins removing polluting septic tanks in race against sea level rise. Yeah, I don't really know much about septic tanks. All I know is that the one that sits outside my house keeps overflowing. And it can't be good for the environment or my nostrils. My landlord supposedly is dealing with it, but, he doesn't want to spend the money. Jennifer Lopez says Get it done by Monday, I agree. Yes. Oh, what, the Supreme Court Justice nomination? I agree. I really don't understand why it's going to take 4 weeks. Just do it already, and get Mr. Breyer to step down sooner. Just get it done, because I'm telling you, they're gonna land in hot water. They're gonna end up in a situation. And nothing will get done, and then it'll be, before you know it, it'll be the Republicans controlling Congress and the Senate, and before you know it, it'll be Donald Trump back as the president, and before you know it, he'll get to nominate somebody, and then you'll have almost a complete conservative majority. Well, there's already a conservative majority, but you'll have, there'll never be any balance on the court, ever. Tyrone has joined us from Maryland. Good morning, Tyrone, or good afternoon. Welcome to the show. The Orlando Sentinel is next up. Bill would aid big firms in tax auctions. Some say measure could potentially squeeze small investors and homeowners. Also a photograph of Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer. He really does look very old in this photograph. When people get really old, their skin turns yellow. I mean, it's almost like he's a walking corpse. He's 83 years of age. But I'm worried that if the jaundice is setting in now, the guy might only have a couple of weeks. Biden, please, get on with it. President Joe Biden strongly affirmed on Thursday he will nominate the first black woman to the U.S. Supreme Court, declaring such historic representation is long overdue and promising to announce his choice by the end of February. Yeah. Well, by the end of February could mean Monday, couldn't it, Jennifer Lopez? So, bill would aid big firms in tax auctions. It says a bill moving through the Florida legislature would give financial heavyweights an edge in online government auctions at the expense of smaller investors. Yes, tax collectors say the changes would reinstate a cartel for a little-known $1 billion market in Florida, letting a handful of large investors dominate the market and drive up costs for homeowners who fall behind on their taxes. A long-time player in the market who stands to benefit is pushing the legislation to boost its chances. His company hired a former state representative turned lobbyist who appears to have channeled $40,000 in political contributions from the company to committee controlled by the Senate President and House Speaker. Wow. Wow. Florida really is a law unto itself, isn't it? I do think it's sad that I just would never dream of wanting to visit Florida anymore. I went there a few times when I was younger to go to Disneyland in Orlando and experience Miami Beach and stuff like that. But I just now when I hear about what's going on there and about how different it is to the rest of the world, I'm just like, it just doesn't make sense to me. Pilot gave SpaceX trip away to a friend. This is an interesting story. He told his family and a few friends he dropped hints to a couple of colleagues, so hardly anyone knew that a Florida-based airline pilot could have and should have been on board when SpaceX launched its first tourists into orbit last year from Kennedy Space Center. Kyle Hipchen is the real winner of a first-of-its-kind sweepstakes, who gave his seat to his former Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University roommate. Though Hipchen's secret is finally out, that doesn't make it any easier knowing he missed his chance to orbit Earth because he exceeded the weight limit. He still hasn't watched the Netflix series on the 3-day flight purchased by a tech entrepreneur for himself and 3 guests last September. It hurts too much, he said. I'm insanely disappointed, but it is what it is. He's a Florida-based captain for Delta's regional carrier, Endeavor Air. He's too big. The guy's too fat. Isn't it interesting how there's like a weight limit to go into space, but not a weight limit to fly the aeroplane? Because if you want to evacuate an aeroplane, you have to do it in under 90 seconds. You know that, don't you? That 90 seconds is the time that a commercial aircraft has to be evacuated. If they open the doors, if they do an emergency landing, if the engine's on fire and they land in an emergency, they have 90 seconds to evacuate the aircraft. And my concern is I've seen flight attendants and pilots who are so overweight that I worry about them, in the event of an emergency, about their fitness. I feel the same about police officers as well. I don't think they should be overweight because I think that they're more likely to shoot their gun if they're overweight. Because they don't want to run after the suspect, so they'll shoot. I've always thought this. Anyway, good on Carl Hipchen for giving away his ticket, and hopefully right now he's on the Atkins diet. I was reading about another diet yesterday. Is it Dr. Saber's diet? I think it's they call it the Alkaline Diet. Have you heard about this? It's a huge thing. It's like veganism, but you also realkaline your body. And he's not a real doctor, by the way. He's like a homeopathic guy. But he basically created a diet whereby it's veganism, but there's also this kind of alkalining element to it as well, which I can completely understand, and it makes perfect sense from a nutrition perspective. But it's just a new one that I discovered yesterday, in my kind of infinite desire to kind of find the perfect eating plan. I'm pretty hungry now, actually. A little bit hungry. These tunes are so good, aren't they? Should we talk about the space shuttle just in the last sequence? Because we've only got really like 10 or 11, 12 minutes left. So I'd like to talk, because we've talked about some of these other subjects as we've been looking through the morning papers. But at 11:38 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on the 28th of January, 1986, this day, 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger lifted off from Cape Canaveral in Florida. And Krista McAuliffe is on her way to becoming the first ordinary U.S. civilian to travel into space. She's the 37-year-old high school social studies teacher from New Hampshire. She won a competition that earned her a place among the 7-member crew of the Challenger. She underwent months of shuttle training, but then, beginning on the 23rd of January, was forced to wait 6 long days as the Challenger's launch countdown was repeatedly delayed because of weather and technical problems. And finally, on the 28th, the shuttle lifted off. And you may remember what happened. I remember it very well. I remember watching it because it was back in the day when, of course, the space shuttle launches were exciting. After a while, because the space shuttles literally went dozens and dozens of times into space, and after a while, the space shuttle, which was the first ever reusable spaceship, was going and coming back, and it didn't even make the news. But of course, on this day, in 1986, it made the news. Because as it lifted off, it wasn't long. I think it was 73 seconds. Hundreds on the ground, including her family, stared in disbelief as the shuttle broke up in a forking plume of smoke and fire. Millions more watched the wrenching tragedy unfold live on television, and there were no survivors. And you may remember, I remember, that it was those tiles, those heat-resistant tiles. They're thick, about that thick. They're about 4 inches square, and they're about 3 inches thick. And they basically lined the bottom of the space shuttle. And wasn't that the problem? Didn't one of those fall off? They were like glued on. I've actually been to see the space shuttle because here in the California Science Center, the space shuttle is a free exhibit. It's actually the Enterprise. They call it the Enterprise. It was the first one. I think it was the prototype one that they used, that they flew into space or into low Earth orbit. And they used it as a practice one to land back at, Andrews Air Force Base or somewhere. It's a glide, don't you? Carl, are you aware of this? That the space shuttle has absolutely no engines. So when it comes back to land at Andrews Air Force Base, it's basically falling out of the sky. It doesn't have any engines at all. It is gliding all the way from space. It has a little bit of engine which pushes it out of orbit and back into Earth's atmosphere. And then the engine runs out. They've got no more fuel. They have no capability of flying. All they can do is puff a little bit of air out left and right to turn it, and then they get it into its position. And the whole thing is a computer-controlled steering job to bring it back to a solitary runway. And then they flare the aircraft, so it comes down like this. And that's why it has those tiles on it, so that those tiles protect it when it re-enters Earth's atmosphere and stops the thing from burning up, because these big polystyrene tiles are heat resistant. And then the whole thing is a glide, and that's why they don't put the wheels down until like 4 seconds before they land, because they need that flat surface, because it's not a big wing, it's like it falls like a stone, but they're able to steer it, and then they flare the aircraft in the last few minutes, and then those wings take over. And that's why it has a parachute at the back, because it's falling so fast, the parachute slows it down. The wheels come out just as it touches down, because they don't want to affect the aerodynamic quality of the underside of the spaceship. And it always lands perfectly. It's never, ever not landed perfectly. Yeah, they're trying to work out, Carlos was telling me, they're trying to work out how to how to do their laundry in space. I mean, if it was the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, there would be like a laundry truck that just floated by, and they'd be able to hand their stuff over, and it would all get pressed and brought back, by some space alien. In the aftermath of the disaster in 1986, Ronald Reagan appointed a special commission to determine what went wrong with Challenger and to develop future corrective measures. The Presidential Commission was headed by former Secretary of State William Rogers and included former astronaut Neil Armstrong and former test pilot Chuck Yeager. The investigation determined the disaster was caused by the failure of an O-ring seal in one of the 2 solid fuel rockets. The elastic O-ring did not respond as expected because of the cold temperatures at launch time, which began a chain of events that resulted in the massive loss. As a result, NASA did not send astronauts into space for more than 2 years. That's right, I'm confusing the 2 disasters. There was 2 space shuttle disasters. This one was this Challenger, which was the rocket fuel. It was the O-ring seal in the fuel rocket that caused the explosion. And the other disaster was the one when the spaceship was returning. Is that right? And it exploded when it was returning. That's right. The Challenger was on liftoff, and the Columbia was the other one that I'm thinking of. Columbia. That was 2003. And that was on re-entry. And that was because of the tile that was on the underside. Yes, in September 1988, space shuttle flights resumed with the successful launching of the Discovery. And since then, the Space Shuttle has carried out numerous important missions, such as the repair and maintenance of the Hubble Space Telescope and the construction of the International Space Station. But the second disaster was on the 1st of February 2003. A second Space Shuttle disaster rocked the United States when Columbia disintegrated upon re-entry of the Earth's atmosphere. All aboard were killed, despite fears that the problems that downed Columbia had not been satisfactorily addressed. Space Shuttle flights resumed in 2005 when Discovery was again put into orbit. The Space Shuttle program formally ended on August 31st, 2011, after its final mission, flown by Atlantis. Carl, have you ever actually seen the Space Shuttle close up? Have you ever been to see it? It's gigantic. It's so wonderful to go and see it in the hangar here at the California Science Center. It's just wonderful. Eric, thank you for joining us this morning. Welcome. Ethan is here as well. Jennifer Lopez says, no, Trump cannot come back. We'll be lined up with Russia and become communist. We'll never become communist. And, I don't think communism is something to be feared quite as people fear it here. It's not really possible to have communism in America. It just isn't. It's not possible. We're too far evolved as a capitalist society. And we're also a socialist society, because we have social programs like Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security and all that stuff. So we're already a kind of socialist capitalist system. But I wouldn't worry about the whole communism thing in Russia. That's not really that's more scaremongering. But I do think Trump will be back. Personally, I do think that. And I think it's important that we recognize that unless the guy is unless the guy is convicted of crimes, like sedition and sedition and conspiracy, against the United States with the coup. Unless those things happen, there's a very good chance that he will run again and he will win. So it's kind of a race against time, if the Justice Department want to investigate him, and if the Southern District of New York want to investigate or convict him for his, alleged fraud crimes, and if the Manhattan District want to get him for alleged fraud crimes as well. So it's a bit of a race now, isn't it? So yes, we are remembering the Space Shuttle Challenger, which exploded on takeoff on this day in 1986. And then finally, should we have a quick look at Andrew Carnegie? Because I promised that we were going to. He is the Carnegie Institute founder. On this day in Washington, D.C., 1902, as the Organization for Scientific Discovery. His intention was for the institution to be his home. Not his home, to be home to exceptional individuals like him. Men and women with imagination and extraordinary dedication, capable of working at the cutting edge of their fields. Carnegie scientists are leaders in the life and environmental sciences, earth and planetary science, and astronomy and astrophysics. They seek answers to questions about the structure of the universe, the formation of our solar system and other worlds around distant stars, the behavior and transformation of matter when subjected to extreme conditions, the systems and cycles that govern Earth's processes, and the synergy of molecules that make life possible. So he was a self-educated working boy who loved books. He immigrated from Scotland in 1842, settled in Pittsburgh, and he attended night school and borrowed books, and he went from factory worker in a textile mill to successful entrepreneur and industrialist, and rose to prominence by founding what became the world's largest steel-producing company by the end of the 19th century. Well, that's how he made his money, you see. Steel. Oh, I love a rags to riches story. I really do. But I mean, a lot of the great Americans are rags to riches stories, aren't they? Because invariably they are immigrants. This guy came from Scotland. But just by nature of being an immigrant, you are effectively escaping a land, whether it be Nazi Germany or somewhere that, where you feel persecuted, or where there's, you're an economic migrant, you're seeking a better life, or you want to make money, or you want to work. And so invariably the great stories of these great Americans, the inventors and the artists and the creators, they invariably have come from places where there was fewer opportunities. In 1900, he donated $1 million for the creation of a technical institute for the city of Pittsburgh, envisaging a school where working-class men and women of Pittsburgh could learn practical skills, trades, and crafts that would enhance their careers. He says, "My heart is in the work," which will become part of the school's official motto. So the Carnegie Technical Schools offered 2- and 3-year certificates in the arts as well as engineering disciplines, and included a college for women. So Carnegie Tech, obviously, the Graduate School, School of Urban and Public Affairs. By the time 1986 came round, the same year as the Challenger disaster, the Carnegie School of Computer Science, pioneering computing and artificial intelligence, led by the interdisciplinary efforts of Alan Newell and Herbert Simon. And then, of course, Carnegie Mellon University, where melons from around the world came to be educated. Wonderful. So every time you see the word Carnegie or the name Carnegie, whether it be Carnegie Hall or Carnegie Mellon or, any of these campuses, then now you know who the guy is. A Scotsman. I'm Anthony Davis. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for joining Backchannel on this Friday morning. I'll see you on Monday morning at 9 a.m. Stay with us now for Your Pal Hal. He's next.